Now to Anthony Albanese's economic agenda. The PM was the keynote speaker at Sky News Australia's Economic Outlook Forum today, and he says it's time to get back to business, calling for less government involvement and for business to drive economic growth.
In a strong, dynamic and productive economy, government should be a driver of growth, but not the driver of growth. Facilitating private sector investment and job creation, not seeking to replace it.
Critics say it's too little, too late amid cost of living pressures and sluggish productivity. Joining me now to discuss this and more, former Queensland Premier Campbell Newman. Campbell, always great to see you. Do you think, is this a genuine reform push or is this just spin?
Well, when I was eating my breakfast Vegemite toast, I almost choked with disbelief, I have to say, because sadly this government over the last 3 years has done a whole range of things to make life very difficult for business in this country, but particularly small and medium-sized businesses who don't have the wherewithal, the financial resources to deal with much of the bureaucracy and red tape that's been introduced. But look, if the Prime Minister really wants to do this, fantastic. If Jim Chalmers is serious about productivity improvements and dealing with this issue, that's fantastic as well. But frankly, they better start listening. I mean, they could start by listening on this unrealised gains on super balances over $3 million. And that's important, Caroline, because you just talked about in your grab about investment. I'm an investor with my wife in small startup companies. We've done so through our super fund in the last 10 years. We will never invest again because, and I won't go into all the details now, because it just simply won't work anymore. Another example that the Prime Minister should be getting onto is the regulators. You've got AUSTRAC, you've got ASIC in particular, you've got APRA, and you've got the ATO to a certain extent, and Treasury in the background, always pushing for more regulation. Right now, the head of ASIC, Joe Longo, is in complete defiance of a parliamentary inquiry into the issue of investment by sophisticated investors, continuing to advocate what the bipartisan committee led by Labor Senator Deborah O'Neill actually said they shouldn't do. So these are just a few quick examples. Look, the Prime Minister would have my 100% support if he and Jim Chalmers get real about this. I look forward to it.
Well, look, against the backdrop of all of this, industry leaders are also urging the Prime Minister to stand firm in trade talks with the US as Donald Trump's looming tariffs spark fresh uncertainty for Australian exporters. Now, despite some global deals being struck, local business groups say we must defend our national interest and refuse to weaken biosecurity or other key protections. Bit difficult since we haven't been able to get a meeting between our Prime Minister and the President. And we had a very defensive response from the PM today when he was asked if he'd received a phone call on this from the President.
Is there something wrong here? Where's your phone call from Donald Trump in that sense?
I've had three.
But is it just courteous of him not to call you then?
I'm not worried by someone making an understandable decision, which he did, to return to Washington. And one of the things that we've got to do, Andrew, and if you compare it with some media overseas, is we've got to stop talking Australia down.
Got to stop talking Australia down, Campbell. That means stop talking Albo down. How tough do you think he can afford to get here when he does get a meeting or a phone call with Trump? You can just sort of see Trump walking all over him.
Well, firstly, Australia doesn't really need to give away anything because we reached a free trade agreement some years ago and made very significant concessions. And I used to work in agribusiness about 20 years ago. And, I just know how important the biosecurity arrangements are. For example, sadly, the problem is we don't have a lot of bargaining chips now. We've got, obviously, a Prime Minister and an ambassador in Washington who've been, made negative comments about the President in the past. We're not stepping up to the plate as the US are demanding in terms of defence spending. So I think we've got to, put some things like that on the table to actually get Washington's attention if we're to get somewhere with this.
Yeah, especially since Trump is all about the art of the deal. Now, the federal government has locked in a massive $7.1 billion deal to fund the Brisbane 2032 Olympics with stadium construction already underway. But critics are questioning such a hefty price tag in these tough economic times. Campbell, you've been vocal about Olympic spending. Only last week we had Noel Pearson writing a piece saying Brisbane just wasn't match fit for a global sports event like this. Do you think this deal will silence some of the naysayers?
Well, I guess I'm a naysayer. It won't silence me, particularly because what we're seeing is the original inner city park of Brisbane, meant to be there for the people for all time, being totally destroyed. And, you know, the government has spun this, that there's going to be 13 or 14% taken for a stadium. That's complete Tommy rot. It's now, on the calculations that the activist group have made, about 60%, 66% of the green space going. Probably 1,200 to 1,500 trees in the north section of the park alone being destroyed. They're building the National Aquatic Centre in an area on the south side of the park, which even the Games Infrastructure Committee didn't recommend that. And as for the price tag, you know, we're talking about, you know, the Olympics not being the cheap and cheerful, inexpensive Olympics that were pitched to us by Lord Mayor Graham Quirk and the mayors of South East Queensland when they went out to get this. That's what they said. We'd use existing infrastructure. Where's all that gone? We're now heading for, I reckon, a $15 billion total bill for these Olympics. You can almost count on that, sadly. But really, one of the most egregious things is the destruction of the park. And now, with this financial commitment, guess what? The Prime Minister, Caroline, the Australian Labor Party, are complicit in the destruction of the park. They're also complicit in the destruction of Aboriginal cultural heritage, because this was a very important site for Aboriginal people. And that is historical fact, absolute historical fact. And that's just being swept away by this move. So I'm very sad, very distressed, as you can tell, by this funding commitment and what's going on.
Well, there's a lot of irony in that for everything the government does to protect these Indigenous sites and then to go ahead with this. Campbell Newman will follow up on this story, but thank you for your time tonight.